Earlier, we talked with Ryan Morrow, the national security analyst for the Clarion Project, about the growing threat of radical Islam. Do you think the American public is still unaware of the dangers of radical Islam and what danger it poses to the West, like Saeed saying that we want to change the U.S. Constitution? Do Americans get it?
On 9/11, Americans woke up to Al-Qaeda. I think Americans understand Al-Qaeda. How could you not understand someone that commits a beheading in Oklahoma? Very easy to understand. What they have not awakened to is the radical Islamic ideology in all of its different forms. So yes, we understand those that try to blow up American civilians on American territory, but do we understand the agenda of Islamists that want to combine mosque and state, that implement Sharia overseas and eventually would like to make it happen here in the United States? When you put up another organization like the Muslim Brotherhood next to Al-Qaeda, they appear moderate, but then you look at the language and the beliefs, and they are actually extremist. And that is what I think Americans have yet to learn. One
thing that it seems like where jihad has come to the U.S. soil is what happened in Moore, Oklahoma, just a few days ago. Do you think that is something that people will start to understand as well, because it's so immediate, so gruesome, and yet so seemingly tied to Islam?
I think Americans, as more and more of these incidents happen, are starting to understand violent Islamic extremism, especially when it happens on American soil. But are they understanding the ideology that causes that? Consistently, when you look at the testimony of people that commit these acts, what guides them? It's the belief in the combination of mosque and state. It's, yes, they'll complain about things like American policy and U.S. support for Israel. But if you believe that you have to resurrect the caliphate and implement Sharia law around the world, of course you're going to be angry at those things. Because if you believe that Allah wants you to resurrect the caliphate and implement Sharia law, that has to come to an end. American support for Israel, American foreign policy, and that's the driving force. For me, what was more disturbing about the episode of someone being beheaded in Oklahoma, beyond the obvious violence, was the silence of the people that were friends with this individual on Facebook and apparently did nothing. It was obvious that this was an individual that sooner or later would carry out some type of Islamic terrorist attack or Islamic violence. It's inconceivable that a large number of those friends with him on Facebook didn't know that this is what he was posting. How many of them actually reported that to the FBI? I think that Americans also need a wake-up call that we have a duty as citizens that when we see any type of threat of violence or hatred towards another human being on Facebook, we have to take it seriously and take action. And I'm very disappointed to see that apparently that's not what happened in Oklahoma.
I think Israelis here get it here. And, if there's a danger, if they see any threat, they're able or more than willing to kind of tell authorities about that, and maybe that's a lesson people in the U.S. need to understand. You mentioned the caliphate, and now the Islamic State has declared a caliphate. Al-Baghdadi has done that just a few weeks ago. Has this changed the dynamic of the war on radical Islam or the rise of Islam here in the Middle East?
I think that the Islamic State is so brutal, and they are so brutal particularly to those that they want to win over, that they're at a disadvantage. Right now they have really increased in their strength, and so it's very frightening, and it's made this the #1 issue across the news media in the United States in a way that it hasn't been for many years now. And so that's a big change. But fundamentally, is this a change in the dynamics of the region? Not so much. This is the inevitable result of having a radical Islamic ideology in the Middle East. And I want to point out that a lot of Muslims have stood against this ideology. Think about all the Egyptian Muslims that rose up against the Muslim Brotherhood, or Muslim activists that say, you know what, we understand that the combination of mosque and state doesn't work anymore. We want to move in a more Western direction. Or we're tired of war and we want peace with Israel and peace with the West. This doesn't make sense and we don't want to hand this world to our children. How come they're not the leaders in the region? How come they're being persecuted? How come organizations here in the United States aren't giving them a platform so that they can win the ideological war? So on the one hand, things have gotten to be much more frightening with the rise of ISIS, but I would say that actually ISIS is just a reflection of the status quo that we have failed to recognize for quite some time.
Appreciate you being here with on Jerusalem Dateline.
All right, thank you so much.